up on this Tuesday edition of Newsline at noon, U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Mark Lippert will be discharged from hospital this afternoon. Doctors say he's doing well. Washington, meanwhile, says it's in close cooperation with Seoul on the probe. German Chancellor Angela Merkel reminds Japan that facing history squarely as Germany had done is crucial in mending ties with its neighbors. Plus, pulling out all the stops to revive the sluggish economy, Korea's finance minister unveils a plan to attract private capital investment in the construction sector. He calls it Korea's version of the New Deal policy. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Tuesday, March 10th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. Our top story this afternoon, the U.S. Ambassador to South Korea Mark Lippert, who was hospitalized last Thursday after being attacked by a knife-wielding South Korean man, will be discharged from hospital later this afternoon.
For more, let's go live to our Hwang Seung-hee, who's standing by at Seoul's Yonsei Severance Hospital in Seodae-mungu District. Seung-hee, how's the ambassador doing?
Well, Jin-joo, he must be doing really well because doctors say that he will be leaving the hospital at around 2 p.m. Korea time today, which will be in just about 2 hours' time. Now, they have removed all the stitches on his face and say that he is in a very, very good condition. The U.S. envoy needed 80 stitches following that appalling knife attack in central Seoul last weekend. The 80 stitches were on his right cheek and left arm. Doctors said during a press briefing this morning, however, that Lippert was working up until 2 a.m. and woke up at 7 o'clock this morning without any problems, which probably means he has partly resumed his daily activities. However, he's still feeling some pain in his left arm, and doctors will be visiting his home every day to check up on his condition until he is fully recovered.
And Seung-hee, opinion is still divided over whether this was a politically motivated attack on the U.S. ambassador. If it is deemed to be that case, will the U.S. consider putting North Korea back on its list of state sponsors of terrorism?
Well, Mark, it's still too early to tell since investigation is still ongoing. But what we do know is that police have found a dozen pro-North Korea books at the attacker's home. The 55-year-old assailant Kim Ki-jong also reportedly praised the late North Korea founder Kim Il-sung during his interrogation, calling him the greatest leader of the 20th century and that there is no one like him here in the South. Now, the State Department said Monday that the question of putting North Korea back on its list of state sponsors of terrorism is going several steps ahead of where things are right now, and it is waiting for the investigation to conclude before it can make any decisions.
And how is the U.S. government responding to the attack and the ongoing probe?
Well, State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki said that the U.S. Embassy here in Seoul is closely coordinating with Washington on the investigation, but that South Korea definitely has the lead on the investigation. Psaki added that Washington appreciates Seoul's swift response to the attack and the outpouring support by the South Korean government and the South Korean public. For Ambassador Lippert, she again reiterated that Seoul remains one of Washington's most important partners. Ambassador Lippert is expected to give a short statement before he sets off home, so I will have more updates in our later newscast. This has been Hwang Seung-hee reporting live from Yonsei Severance Hospital.
And moving on, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who is currently on a visit to Japan, has called on the Abe administration to face up to its wartime atrocities, just as Germany did after World War II. She said it would be a big first step toward mending relations with its neighbors. Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel discussed Germany's reconciliatory efforts after World War II on the first day of her two-day visit to Japan. At a joint press conference with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Monday, Merkel said Germany's reacceptance by its European neighbors following the war was possible because it has squarely faced its dark past. Merkel said that her country also made sure that the Nazis' horrendous acts would never be overlooked by history, something she regards as a precondition to reconciliation.
France, for example, was willing to approach Germany after World War II. The European Union we have today is in fact the product of such a reconciliation process because after centuries of wars, the Europeans said, "We want to be united. It is our luck that we are united, which led to a stable peace order."
Her remarks come at a time when Japan has been receiving strong criticism from Korea and China over inadequate acknowledgement of its wartime atrocities. Tokyo faced harsh backlash after it attempted to review past apologies that were made over the forced sexual enslavement of Asian women during World War II, including the landmark 1995 Murayama Statement. Also, Japanese school textbooks have long been accused of whitewashing the country's past aggressions in Asia. Prime Minister Abe is set to issue a statement for the 70th anniversary of Japan's defeat in World War II in August, but there's speculation that it'll try to water down Japan's wartime atrocities. Kim Jung, Arirang News.
And upon Merkel's official visit to Tokyo, a German newspaper has slammed the Japanese government for trying to whitewash the country's past wrongdoings. The centrist daily Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung said Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's attempts to water down Tokyo's past apologies for its aggression in Asia are stifling Japan's economic recovery as they're blocking trade to the world's largest export market, China, and definitely not helping Japanese companies. It also says the Abe administration's behavior serves to bring Korea and China closer together. Dennis Halpin, a visiting scholar at the U.S.-Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, also warned of a rise of historical revisionists in Japan who think their country was the victim in World War II. The United Nations is turning up the heat on North Korea to address its abduction of hundreds of foreign nationals from countries as far afield as Lebanon and Malaysia. A top UN official on North Korean human rights says it's high time for Pyongyang to account for the disappearances. Connie Kim has more.
A senior human rights investigator at the United Nations is calling for concerted international pressure to get North Korea to address its kidnapping of hundreds of foreign nationals. In a report released on Monday, Marzuki Darusman, the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights in North Korea, said countries should come together for sustained and resolute action to bring back surviving abductees and shed light on all abduction cases. According to Darusman, North Korean agents have, over the span of more than 50 years, abducted hundreds of foreign nationals from countries such as Japan, South Korea, China, Lebanon, and Malaysia. The strategy laid out in the report calls for efforts to refer the North Korean leadership to the International Criminal Court and a global approach to improve North Korea's dire human rights situation. The multi-track approach ultimately aims to bring a close to all enforced disappearances by Pyongyang. North Korea's human rights abuses have come under the spotlight with the UN's publication last year of a landmark report. It outlined North Korea's human rights abuses, including torture, deliberate starvation, and execution, leading the approval of a UN General Assembly resolution on the North's human rights abuses. North Korea continues to demand all investigations be scrapped in light of recent events. Speaking in Geneva last week, North Korea's Foreign Minister Lee Soo-yong demanded resolutions based on the report be revoked immediately since the court testimonies were proven to be false after a high-profile defector admitted of falsifying parts of his stories in a political prison camp. Darusman's report will be presented to the Human Rights Council in Geneva next week. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, one of the most recognizable faces in the North Korean leadership, Chae Ryong-hae, Secretary of the Workers' Party, appears to have been demoted. Speculation first arose that Chae had tumbled down the ranks last month when, in a state media report, Chae's name was mentioned after Hwang Byung-seo, the director of the General Political Bureau of the North Korean Army. Chae had been named before Hwang since last October. North Korea experts suggest the army chief has leapfrogged Chae as the regime's second most powerful man. They say North Korean leader Kim Jong-un might be trying to ensure certain figures do not concentrate too much power, and it could also signal that Kim is confident that he has cemented his position. China is reportedly aiming to block the potential deployment to the Korean peninsula of a U.S. missile defense system dubbed THAAD. The Washington Free Beacon reports that Chinese President Xi Jinping has tried to persuade President Park Geun-hye not to accept moves to deploy the system in South Korea. Citing current and former U.S. officials, the report suggests that Beijing will provide more intimate trade and business chances if Seoul knocks the U.S. back. The article adds that China is opposed to the potential deployment as it believes it would harm its own national security. South Korea's defense ministry reaffirmed on Monday that there are no plans to deploy THAAD in the nation, and the US has made no request either. Seoul says it's working on its own missile defense system that should be ready by 2020. We are approaching the one-year anniversary since the tragic sinking of the Seoul ferry. The disaster left more than 300 people dead, many of them high school students. And ceremonies to honor the victims continue even beyond Korea's borders. Earlier this week, in the United States, in fact, 2 of the victims were awarded a special prize for sacrificing their lives in order to save a great many others. Gwon-soa reports.
It's a medal they will never wear. 2 young women who sacrificed their lives to save passengers on the ill-fated Seoul ferry were awarded gold medallions at a chapel in Philadelphia on Sunday for their acts of bravery in last year's disaster. Choi Hae-jung was a teacher at Tanwon High School, which is where the more than 320 students on the ferry were enrolled. They were on a class trip to Jeju Island. Choi is said to have gone down with the ship to save as many people as possible. Park Ji-young was a member of the crew who reportedly saved around 50 passengers before she died, handing them life vests without leaving one for herself.
We will think of the prize as an honor given to us by our children and will live our lives in proud service of society.
The 4 Chaplains Memorial Foundation is a non-profit established by U.S. President Harry Truman in 1951 in remembrance of 4 chaplains who went down with a torpedoed cruise ship during World War II after saving other passengers and giving up their own life vests.
We feel that this act by the 2 young ladies, Ms. Choi and Ms. Park, is directly related to the sacrifice of the 4 chaplains.
Former U.S. Presidents Truman, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Jimmy Carter, and Ronald Reagan are also among those who have received the prize for their service to the public. Choi and Park are the first Koreans to be given the award, which now stands as a reminder to people around the world of the sacrifices made on April 16, 2014. Gwon-soa, Arirang News.
Ever since Choi Kyung-hwan's economic team moved into the finance ministry last summer, they have been pulling out almost all the stops to revitalize the economy. Now, along with the government's announcement to front-load all of this year's economic recovery budget in the first half, the finance minister also unveiled a plan to attract private investment in infrastructure projects, a plan he's calling Korea's version of the New Deal policy. Kim Min-ji explains.
Korea's finance minister says he's seeking to spur private investment as part of plans to revitalize the economy. Saying that the government will seek to implement a Korean version of the New Deal, Minister Chae Kyung-hwan announced fresh plans to invigorate infrastructure investment, such as through social overhead capital projects. That includes building government facilities and prisons and revamping schools.
Many countries are trying to use new deals to overcome a recession. We also feel that it is necessary.
The New Deal was a program of the administration of U.S. President Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s to bring economic relief and pull the country out of the Great Depression. Unlike the U.S. program, however, the finance minister made clear that the government will induce investment from the private sector rather than drawing on government funds. The ministry says the government plans to share the risks associated with investment with private companies, and it will adopt a profit-sharing structure. However, analysts have questions about the feasibility of the plan. They point out that it will require the strong leadership of the government, strong communication between the government and the public, as well as close coordination of fiscal and monetary policies. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Korea's older generations are becoming more hesitant to spend money these days. Statistics Korea says the average propensity to consume tumbled by 11.5 percentage points for people in their 60s between 2003 and last year. The index is the proportion of money people use from their disposable income. In 2003, that age group was spending the most. The second biggest drop was experienced by those in their 50s, with a 5.7 percentage point drop. Now, analysts attribute the figures to people trying to save as much as they can for their retirement as the average lifespan gets longer, while the average working span is not getting longer accordingly.
Now you'll soon be able to have an Apple product in your pocket, in your home, and on your wrist. The US tech giant has unveiled its highly anticipated Apple Watch. The launch is expected to fire up the sluggish wearables markets, with other industry players such as Korea's Samsung and LG scrambling to get in on the action. Now, Ji Myung-gil reports.
It's been 5 years since Apple launched the iPad, and now the company is making a major play for the wearables market with this Apple Watch. The watch comes in 3 different models: the Apple Watch, the Apple Watch Sport, and the high-end Apple Watch Edition. The price ranges from $349 to $10,000 for a luxury gold edition. The watch has many integrated features such as the Apple Pay mobile wallet, messaging, calls, health tracking applications, and the ability to connect your watch to a friend's watch. Pre-orders for the watch start April 10th and it will go on sale on April 24th. It will first be available in the US, Australia, China, and Japan, among other countries.
The Apple Watch is the most advanced timepiece ever created.
Apple enters a market already crowded by major tech companies, ranging from Korea's Samsung and LG to China's Huawei and startups such as Pebble. And with the smartwatch market expected to take off this year with projected sales of 28 million units from last year's 4.6 million, mobile manufacturers are pouring their efforts into making their smartwatches better and more visually appealing. Samsung, which had attempted to steal Apple's thunder with the release of its Galaxy Gear in 2013, is planning to release a new smartwatch during the first half of the year. LG surprised many with its Urbane smartwatch, which has the ability to make and receive phone calls without the need for a connected smartphone. Apple requires a connection to an iPhone to be fully operational. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Finance ministers in the Eurozone criticise Greece for wasting time as they race to unlock further funding for the troubled South European country. Our Shin Se-min reports.
European finance ministers are impatient, saying there is no time to lose. Greece is quickly running out of funds and must repay its IMF loan installment by the end of the month. Finance ministers in the Eurozone have criticized Greece for wasting time. Chairing a meeting with Eurozone finance ministers on Monday, the Dutch finance minister said technical talks on further funding for a troubled Greece would start on Wednesday.
The talks have to start rather today than tomorrow, and we shouldn't waste so much time. The extension is only for 4 months, and the time is ticking away.
The Eurogroup chairman says Eurozone member nations are ready to support Greece if it continues on the economic reform path. The Eurozone agreed last month to extend Greece's bailout program until June, and it is hoping to approve a detailed list of reforms by next month. Athens has thus far only outlined its proposals in broad terms. In the meantime, European Central Bank began its €1 billion quantitative easing program on Monday as Europe's national central banks began picking up the debts of their own governments. The euro fell to its lowest level against the US dollar in 11.5 years on Monday, ending at $1.08.5, spurring talks of euro-dollar parity. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And time now for a look through the global headlines for following this hour. For that, we connect to our Eunice Kim at the News Center.
Eunice, an assault on an oil field in Libya has left 8 guards dead in a very gruesome way and several foreign workers abducted, and authorities do believe that this is the work of the extremist group that calls itself Islamic State.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. Those 8 guards are said to have been beheaded, and that one of the oil workers who witnessed the decapitation died of a heart attack. Sources say the extremists launched a raid on the Al Ghani oil field some 700 kilometers southeast of the capital of Tripoli on Friday. They also got away with a group of 9 foreign workers. Authorities from the Philippines confirmed that 4 of their nationals were among those kidnapped. Austrian officials say the others were Austrian, Czech, Bangladeshi, and Ghana nationals, with 1 hostage still unidentified. The deadly strike was just one in a series of similar assaults that had forced Libya to declare 11 oil fields as non-operational in recent weeks. Libya's military spokesman on Monday warned the IS group's ultimate goal was to overtake the country's petroleum industry, what he described as the lifeline of the Libyan people. And an epic journey is underway. A solar-powered plane will attempt a record-breaking feat of flying around the world relying only on power from the sun. The Solar Impulse 2 has just recently taken off on its second leg to India after arriving in Oman from Abu Dhabi some 6 hours earlier. The Swiss pilot at the helm, Bertrand Piccard, was congratulated by Monaco's Prince Albert, who was at mission control to witness the maiden voyage. The full mission is expected to be completed over 5 months, and one of the most challenging legs will be a non-stop 8,500 kilometer stretch from Nanjing, China, across the Pacific to reach Hawaii, which is expected to take some 5 days. The wings of Solar Impulse 2 is equipped with 17,000 solar cells and lots of batteries that will enable it to fly in day or night. And finally, scientists say a jawbone fossil discovered by a graduate student in Ethiopia could belong to an early species that led to modern humans in the evolutionary process. Now, what's interesting about this find is that it's estimated to be 400,000 years older than a specimen previously believed to be the oldest in the Homo lineage. Our Kim Hyun-bin has the details.
A 2.8-million-year-old jawbone fossil with 5 teeth intact has been unearthed in an Ethiopian desert. The discovery is evidence that early humans roamed the Earth 500,000 years before what was previously thought. Scientists say the fossil represents the oldest known specimen of the human genus Homo and appears to be in the earliest stages of the human lineage.
And it's important because it is transitional between Australopithecus species, it has some of those characteristics, and of later Homo species. And so we can follow evolution more closely because of it.
The jawbone was found near the location of where the remains of one of the most famous human ancestor fossils, Lucy, was found.
And so we can see how evolution works by having some of the older characteristics of Lucy's species plus the new characteristics of the Homo species in this mandible.
The autonomy of this discovery is seen to have a close relationship with later Homo species, as it encompasses the left side of the jaw. It has features including tooth shape and jaw proportions that separates the Homo lineage species from the more ape-like Australopithecus. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Well, it feels like January, and the cold wave watch is in effect for most parts of the country. And that strong gusty winds are adding a chill to the air, bringing down the sensory temperatures to 5 to 6 degrees lower than the actual numbers. So it still feels like -10 here in Seoul out there, and Daegu and Gwangju still have sensory temperatures at about -7, and it's expected to be quite cold throughout the day today. But the skies will be clear, and we have mostly sunny skies in store all day long, but that won't help much to boost up the highs, as the daytime high here in the capital will only rise to 1, and Daegu and Gwangju rise to 4 and 2, and Busan will peak at 6 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Daejeon should see a high of 3 and 2, and Dokdo only tops out at -1. Well, that's all for me today, and stay warm, everyone.
Thank you, Jiyeon. And yes, you really have to wrap up warm today. It's freezing outside. It's such a cold wind. Well, those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Join us again at the same time on Wednesday. Thank you for watching.